The first time I was asked the question, rhetorically of course, how do you eat an elephant? I was very disturbed, to be honest with you, because elephants are among my favorite creatures on the planet. And just this last winter break, when my family and I were in Cambodia, I got the chance to go to an elephant refuge there. And we were a little concerned, like how are the animals treated there? And so we sent an email and said, before we come visit, we just want to make sure, what do you do with the elephants? And they said, well, here's what happens when you come and visit. You feed the elephants, and then you bathe the elephants, and then you wash the mud off the elephants, and then the next group of tourists come, and they do the same thing, because they have to eat 300 kilos of food a day. And so I bounced this off of my brother-in-law, who's a biologist, and he said, yeah, I think you're good. I think these elephants are well cared for. And it was just so fabulous. So that's how much I love elephants. And so that question, how do you eat an elephant, always kind of disturbed me, but the lesson of it is actually a good one. One bite at a time. You never heard that? Yeah, it's kind of an oldie. And it's true of all sorts of big problems, and that's when it's usually used. Actually, it's attributed to Desmond Tutu. I don't know if he's the one who first came up with that concept. But any big problem, how do you solve it? Bit by bit, little by little, bite by bite. And it's a lesson that is found in this week's Torah portion, but not in an obvious way. So I'm going to take you through a few texts and try to illustrate how that lesson is in the Torah portion, and then think about some of the big problems we're confronting today and how this might be a helpful way of framing it. So the first text comes from this parsha, which Rabbi Stern mentioned at the beginning of our service, Parashat Yitro, which famously also includes the Ten Commandments, but I'm not going to talk about the Ten Commandments tonight. If you come to Torah study tomorrow, we'll definitely touch on that. But the opening line, Vayishma Yitro, Kohen Midian, Choten Moshe et kol asher asa Elohim leMoshe uli Yisrael. So that opening verse, Yitro, and by the way, side note, we learned that not only is he not an Israelite, he was actually a priest, a Midianite priest. So our very own Moshe Rabbeinu, his wife Tzipporah was the daughter of a Midianite priest. Of course, according to the rabbis who come later, she went through a Intro to Judaism class across, right here, and then went to the mikveh across the street, had a full conversion. The Torah just leaves that part out. But anyway, Yitro, it says, heard all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, God's people, how the Eternal had brought Israel out of Egypt. And according to this later rabbinic tradition, not only does Tzipporah convert to Judaism, but who else converts to Judaism? Yitro. Now again, it doesn't say that anywhere in our Torah, but the rabbis just assume, how could it be that Moses' own father-in-law wouldn't make Moses his rabbi, which is an anachronism already. We call him Moshe Rabbeinu, but there weren't rabbis quite yet. But anyway, according to later Jewish tradition, Yitro converts to Judaism. And one of the questions that the Talmud asks, and then Rashi, the great French commentator of the 11th century, he paraphrases the Talmud's question in his commentary, which is the next text there on your sheet. Vayishma Yitro, he asks, what is it that Yitro heard that made him want to convert to Judaism? And I've got a great joke I'll tell you later if you want about that. I'm not going to tell it now because I don't have time, but it's a good one. So you can come grab me after services. So what is it that Yitro heard that made him want to convert to Judaism? And according to the Talmud, and here it's in Rashi's words, he heard about the parting of the Red Sea and the war against Amalek. But then, of course, questions inspire other questions. Okay, so what is it about the parting of the Red Sea, and what is it about the war against Amalek that led Yitro to want to convert to Judaism? And you'll see in the commentary, it doesn't just lead him to convert to Judaism, but it helps him understand how to be a good convert, how to do it properly. So I've often quoted from this bima my cousin, Rabbi Eliezer Davidovich, and this is where I first learned this complicated, beautiful midrash that is actually all embodied in that story about how you eat an elephant. I mean, I could have saved us all a lot of time, but You would miss out on a lot of fun Torah. So he said, okay, let's think about different places in our tradition where the splitting of the sea, the parting of the Red Sea is mentioned. And there's a very famous example in Psalm 136, and our cantors know it very well because it's part of a psalm that's sung. And we say, Legozer yam suf ligzarim ki leolam chasto. And it's a refrain, ki leolam chasto, how great is, and I think Donnie Mossing, when he was here, he has a Psalm 136 that he did that was so much fun. But look at the verse, it's really interesting. Give thanks to the one who split the Red Sea, and I was very careful with the translation, into segments. Because ligzor in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, can mean to cut something. But it says God's the one who cut the Red Sea into gzarim, but it's in the plural, which doesn't seem to make sense. If you've seen either the Cecil B. DeMille version, well, he did two versions actually, or Prince of Egypt. How does the Red Sea part? It's not parted into many parts. There's just one big part, and everybody goes right down the middle. And who's been to Universal Studios? Remember? That's how it works, but that's not what it seems to say in the Psalm. In the Psalm, it says, we give thanks to the one who parted the Red Sea into many different parts. And here is where I think it gets beautiful and interesting and fabulous and not obvious at all, and it relates to that elephant, okay? According to Rabbi Shimon Ehrenfeld, who was born in around 1860, and I couldn't find out exactly when he died, but he's quoted by my cousin, Rabbi Eliezer Davidovich. This is what these multiple parts, this plural means. The sea didn't part for all Israel at once. The way we imagine it, Moses comes and he puts the staff there and it just opens up, or the Midrash where Nachshon steps in and it opens up. That's not how it happened, because it says in the Psalm, God parted the sea in many different parts. Here's the way it worked. According to the merit of each one that went through, meaning each and every one of our ancestors, the sea would part into little partings, bit by bit. So how did our ancestors go through? Each one went through their own little kind of tunnel. It's actually a beautiful, gorgeous image. Imagine, according to our tradition, 1.2 million Israelites or so is probably fewer. But imagine if it were that. And there's 1,200,000 little openings. And each Israelite got to go through his, or Trish had her own opening just for her. And Allison had one just for her. And Barbara had one just for her. Some of the boys too. Ed, you had one. And Meyer. And that's how we went through, bit by bit. But then my cousin takes it a little bit farther, and he says, yes, that's how we went through, but what does that have to do with Yitro converting to Judaism? Little by little, part by part, bit by bit, bite by bite. That's how you do it. And actually, the people who want to convert to Judaism that we work with, we tell them that. Okay, you're about to take on a 3,000-year-old tradition. You could study your entire life, and you'd get this much of it. So how do you tackle a 3,000-year-old tradition? One bite at a time. You study a little bit, and then you know what Shalom Aleichem means, and then you know a little bit more about this week's Torah portion, and then you learn a little bit about Jewish theology. We learned a big word tonight from Rabbi Stern, theophany. It's fun to say. It's a Greek word. But it's important if you're going to study the Bible, and then you get exposed to different resources like thebible.com and My Jewish Learning and Sefaria, and pretty soon you're navigating the tradition and you're understanding things. And what does that have to do about the war against Amalek? Amalek is mentioned in last week's Torah portion and mentioned a couple of other times in the Torah, a couple of other times in the Bible. And the last mention of Amalek in the Bible is during the reign of King Chizkiyahu, King Hezekiah. I'm going to go to Israel on Sunday with some members of our community. I see some folks who are going to be coming with me on Sunday. And when we go to Jerusalem, you can actually see this wall that was built during the time of Chizkiyahu. But according to our Bible, Amalek is not defeated until the time of Chizkiyahu. So think about from the time of Moses to the time of Chizkiyahu is hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. And what does my cousin teach us about that? That if you want to defeat a foe like Amalek, it might take hundreds of years. You might not accomplish it in your own lifetime. And those two insights, which are really one insight, a little bit at a time, you have to be patient. It can take much longer than you think it should. It could take longer than you're even alive to enjoy it or see it or experience it, but you keep doing it. I think those are profound insights, not just about converting to Judaism or tackling any big problem, but also about the moment we're in right now. We are facing an extraordinary challenge in Israel. And if you listen to, I think Rabbi Stern actually mentioned it in one of his teachings over the last few months. If you listen to Sam Harris's podcast, he'll come back to this many, many times. He talks about, the challenge of confronting jihadism, which is what Israel is facing in the form of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, Iran. Each one is a different iteration of that challenge, of that evil. And it's not simple. It's not going to be easy. And we see how complex it is even right now. Today, the United States responded to some of these attacks that we saw in Jordan this week and in Yemen. And so this is not a simple thing that we can just snap our fingers, we can just make it go away. It's going to be difficult. And think about the challenge we're facing confronting anti-Semitism. Many of us, myself included, if you'd have asked me 15 years ago, how much of your rabbinate in the year 2024 is going to be focused on anti-Semitism on our college campuses? I would have said, I don't think any of it, really. I mean, what? How much time would you need to spend on that? And then I spent time on the phone with my daughter this afternoon talking about what she's experiencing on her campus at Barnard in Columbia, and it's just horrendous. There was this poster put up all over campus that has a skunk. Some of you might have seen it online. It's a skunk with a Jewish star, and it says we have to eradicate the skunk. And of course, does it just mean Israel, which is bad enough, but it also means us. That's us too. So if you'd asked me that, I would have said, no, we're not going to have to spend much time at that at all. But we're going to have to keep dealing with that. And guess what? 1,000 years ago, our ancestors had to deal with that. And unfortunately, going all the way back to the time of Pharaoh in Egypt, we had to deal with that. So we're probably going to have to deal with that for a long time going forward. But we're going to keep attacking it bit by bit. And think about, we've talked about the captives. Think about our brothers and sisters who we're going to say a prayer for in just a moment. I'm wearing this sticker, and some of the staff's wearing the sticker as well. 118 days. 118 days. And the Red Cross has not been allowed in. I don't know how hard they're trying to actually get in, but medications, basic kinds of expectations we'd have not been met. 118 days, that's 17 weeks. That's 2,800 hours, 169,000 minutes that we've been waiting. And I don't have an answer for you. And neither does the Israeli government, this government, neither does the IDF. We have not figured this one out. It's enormously complicated, and it involves Qatar and Egypt and Hamas and the PA and Israel and the European Union, the United Nations. But as complicated as it is, we cannot give up. We cannot stop trying. We will not stop trying. We will keep doing our work little by little. And that doesn't ensure success, by the way. It just means like you might not be able to eat the elephant, but you got no chance if you don't try. And so that's part of the reason that I'm wearing this sticker, because my friend Rachel Goldberg asked us to. And she said, everyone should wear this sticker. And then when someone says, what's that? You can say, oh, that's how many days over 130 innocent people have been held in tunnels in Gaza, among them women and non-combatants, to be sure. And then tell them, and if you're upset about that, like I am, make some noise. Call the president, call members of Congress. A friend of mine I was with said, why aren't we putting posters up everywhere? Why aren't every one of us going around town and just putting posters up? And then if someone says, what are you doing? Say, oh, this is my brother, my sister, my cousin, and I want to make sure they're not forgotten and that the world doesn't give up. That's how we do it, day by day by day. No No promise, no guarantee that we'll be successful, but we have to try to solve those big problems by doing all those things. So we post about it on social media. We use every network and platform that we have. We tell our friends about it, and we tell them why it matters to us. And maybe little by little, we can try to make a difference. Often when a rabbi ends her sermon or his sermon, they'll say, Ken yehi ratzon, meaning may my message come true. But Ken yehi ratzon literally means may this be God's will. And so it's sort of like saying, I said these things and I want them to happen. Now, God, make it happen. But I don't want to say that. I want to say, Ken yehi ritzonenu. May it be our will. No guarantee that we can fix it, all those big problems, but we have to take responsibility. We have to be the ones who will say, little by little, bit by bit, cut by cut, bite by bite, we're going to do everything we can to solve those challenges and to make the world the place that it ought to be. Ken yehi ritzonenu.